There is a particular kind of loneliness that does not come from being left out. It comes from choosing to step back. You have done it quietly, gradually, almost without noticing at first. One cancelled plan became two, and two became a habit, and the habit became a preference, and somewhere along the way the preference started to feel like the only honest way to live. You still care about people. That is the part nobody understands when they look from the outside. You are not cold. You are not damaged in the way they assume. But there is something in the noise and the performance and the relentless sociality of ordinary life that exhausts you at a level that goes deeper than tiredness. It drains something essential. And so you have pulled back, not because the world rejected you, but because something inside you keeps insisting on a different kind of life, a quieter one, a more interior one that the people around you do not always recognize or respect or even understand, is a real choice rather than a symptom of something that needs to be fixed. Maybe you have tried to explain it. Maybe you have sat across from someone who cares about you and attempted to put into words why the dinner party left you feeling hollower than before you went, why the group chat fills you with a low, dull dread, why you can spend an entire Saturday alone and feel more genuinely alive than you did at the event you forced yourself to attend on Friday night. And you watched their face while you tried to explain it, and you saw the concern there, the gentle worry, the unspoken question of whether you are okay, and you knew before you finished speaking that you had not managed to say the true thing, the real thing, the thing underneath the thing. You gave up and said you were just tired, because tired is something people understand. But you are not just tired. You are something more complicated than tired. And what I want to explore with you today is the possibility that the distance you keep, the withdrawal that worries the people around you, the solitude you protect with a seriousness that surprises even yourself, is not a malfunction. It is not a wound expressing itself as preference. It may be, in fact, one of the more precise and honest responses available to a certain kind of consciousness, a consciousness that sees clearly, that thinks deeply, that experiences the social world not as a natural habitat, but as a place that requires constant translation, constant performance, constant management of the gap between what is actually happening and what everyone has agreed to pretend is happening. Hannah Arendt, the philosopher who thought more rigorously about the human condition than almost anyone in the 20th century, understood something about the relationship between thinking and withdrawal that most people never examine directly. She drew a distinction, a careful and important one, between the vita activa, the life of action and participation and engagement with the public world, and the vita contemplativa, the life turned inward toward thought, toward understanding, toward the kind of inner activity that cannot happen in a crowd. She did not rank one above the other in the simple way people often assume. She was not antisocial. She understood politics as the highest human activity, but she also understood that genuine thinking requires a withdrawal from the noise of collective life, and that some people are constituted in such a way that this withdrawal is not a retreat from life, but a deepening of it. What she could not have anticipated, writing in the middle of the last century, was the particular intensity of the modern social world, the way it would eventually colonize not just our physical presence, but our attention, our silence, our downtime, the hours we once used to think. She could not have anticipated a world in which the expectation of constant availability, constant responsiveness, constant participation in the performance of connection would become so total and so normalized that simply wanting to be alone would start to read as a disorder rather than a disposition. But she understood the underlying dynamic. She understood that the space of appearance, the public world where we show ourselves to others and are seen, makes certain demands on us that are not compatible with the demands of genuine inner life. And she understood that some people feel that incompatibility more acutely than others. If this perspective is opening something for you, if you have been looking for a framework that takes your need for distance seriously rather than pathologizing it, consider subscribing to this channel. I explore these questions every week, and I would be honored to have you along for the journey. The people who distance themselves from almost everyone are not, in most cases, misanthropes. They do not hate human beings. They often love particular human beings with an intensity and a loyalty that people with larger social circles rarely manage. What they cannot sustain, what genuinely costs them something vital, is the performance that most social interaction requires. And I want to be precise about what I mean by performance, because I am not using the word dismissively. I am using it in the phenomenological sense, in the sense of the ongoing presentation of a self that is calibrated to the expectations and comfort of the people around you. Every social context has its norms, its unspoken rules about what you are supposed to say, and how you are supposed to say it, and what you are supposed to want, and how you are supposed to feel about the things that happen. Most people navigate these norms so automatically, so effortlessly, that they barely notice them as norms at all. They just feel like reality. They feel like how things are. But for a certain kind of person, these norms are visible as norms. The performance is visible as performance. And once you can see the scaffolding, once you cannot help but notice the gap between what is being said and what is actually true, between the role being played and the person doing the playing, between the emotional display being offered and the actual interior state of the person offering it, something becomes very difficult to participate in without a constant internal commentary that is, frankly, exhausting. It is not superiority. Do not mistake this for a claim to superiority. The person who can see the scaffolding is not seeing something the others are missing because they are smarter or more sensitive in some flattering sense. They are often seeing it because something in their cognitive architecture makes the automatic filtering that protects most people from this level of perceptual detail unavailable to them. They are receiving too much signal. They cannot tune it down to a comfortable social frequency. And the social world, which is built for people operating at that comfortable social frequency, does not have a lot of tolerance for people who are receiving everything. I know many of you watching this have never been able to fully explain to anyone why ordinary social life feels the way it does to you. You have carried this privately, maybe for most of your life, wondering whether something is fundamentally wrong with your wiring. But here is what I want you to understand. What you experience in those overstimulating, draining, performance-heavy social situations is real information. It is your perceptual system responding accurately to the complexity of what is actually happening. So let me ask you directly, when did you first understand that you were different in this way? When did you first feel the exhaustion that other people around you did not seem to feel? I want you to share that in the comments below, not because I need engagement, but because someone else watching this right now has never heard anyone else describe their experience, and they need to see your words. They need to know they are not alone. And if words feel hard right now, if it is too much to articulate the whole thing, just type this in the comments. I stopped pretending it was fine. That is all. Because when you do, you give someone else permission to stop pretending too. Your honesty here matters more than you know. What Arendt identified in her work on thinking, particularly in her late essay collections and in the unfinished manuscript she was working on when she died, was that genuine thought, the kind that actually changes how you understand something rather than just shuffling familiar concepts around, requires what she called the two-in-one. It requires the inner dialogue, the conversation the mind has with itself, that can only happen in conditions of some solitude and quiet. Not permanent isolation, not the renunciation of the world, but periodic, intentional withdrawal into an interior space where the only voices are your own and the voices of the thinkers whose books are sitting on your shelf. She believed that this capacity for inner dialogue was not a luxury but a moral necessity, that people who never developed it, who were always fully immersed in the noise of collective life, who never learned to sit alone with their own thinking, were people at risk of a particular kind of moral failure. Not the dramatic failure of the villain who knows they are doing wrong, but chooses it anyway. The quieter, more banal failure of the person who simply never thought carefully about anything, who did what was done because it was done, who participated in whatever collective narrative happened to be available without ever asking whether it was true. She called this the banality of evil, but the concept applies well beyond its original context. There is a banality of unreflective living that is available to anyone who never develops the habit of withdrawal and inner examination. And people who distance themselves from almost everyone are often at a fundamental level people who cannot stop examining, who cannot turn off the inner commentary, who find it genuinely impossible to participate in the unreflective flow of social life because the part of their mind that asks questions, that notices contradictions, that refuses to take the performed reality at face value, is always running, always working, always pulling at the threads that everyone else has agreed not to pull. This is not comfortable. It is often not enjoyable. It is frequently a source of genuine suffering and isolation, but it is also, when understood properly, a form of consciousness that the world needs even when it does not appreciate it. Think about what it actually means to pull back from people. Not the fantasy version where you become a serene hermit in a cottage reading beautiful books, but the actual lived reality of it. The way social invitations start to feel like obligations that require a complex internal negotiation. The way even the people you love most sometimes feel like they are asking you to be someone slightly different from who you actually are and how you love them enough to try. But the trying has a cost that accumulates over time. The way you sometimes catch yourself in a social situation, some perfectly ordinary gathering of perfectly decent people, and feel a kind of transparent unreality about the whole scene, as if you are watching it from a slight remove, as if you are present, but not quite inside it, as if the frequency that everyone else is broadcasting and receiving on is one that your own equipment does not naturally tune to. And the way you feel guilty about that, the way you interpret it as a failing, the way you come home and wonder why you cannot just be normal, why you cannot just enjoy things the way everyone else seems to enjoy them. Here is what I want you to consider. The question of whether you are normal is less interesting and less useful than the question of what is actually happening when you withdraw. What is the withdrawal protecting? What is it preserving? What is the solitude when you finally have it actually for? Because if you watch the people who guard their solitude most fiercely, who resist the constant social pull most consistently, who have made peace with being thought of as distant or odd or too private, what you often find is not emptiness inside. What you find is an interior life of considerable richness, an ongoing conversation with ideas, a relationship with their own thinking that is sustaining in a way that no social event ever quite manages to be, a capacity for genuine presence with the few people they do choose to let close, a presence that is possible precisely because they have not dissipated their attention across 50 shallow connections. Arendt wrote about friendship with great seriousness. She understood it as one of the highest human goods. But the friendship she valued was not the gregarious, surface-skimming kind that fills a social calendar. It was the friendship of genuine encounter, of two people who are both actually present, both actually thinking, both willing to disagree and argue, and go somewhere uncomfortable in the conversation, because they trust each other enough to do that. This kind of friendship is rare. It is, by its nature, available only to a small number of people. And the person who has trained themselves to go without the shallow version, who has learned to endure the loneliness of not having it, rather than fill the void with something that resembles it without being it, is a person who is preserving the possibility of the real thing, holding a space open that the easier, more socially acceptable version would have filled and closed. There is a particular kind of pain that comes with this. I do not want to romanticize it into something it is not. The person who has withdrawn from almost everyone carries a specific weight that is hard to describe to anyone who has not felt it. It is not the acute pain of rejection or loss. It is more like a chronic, low-frequency ache, the knowledge that you are moving through a world that is calibrated for a kind of human being you are not quite, that the easy belonging others seem to experience is not available to you in the same way, that you are always slightly to one side of the room even when you are standing in the middle of it. And there are times when the question of whether it is worth it, whether the interior richness is worth the exterior poverty, whether the depth is worth the isolation, becomes genuinely difficult to answer with confidence. What helps, I think, is not answering that question directly, but examining the premise underneath it. The premise is that you have a choice, that you could, if you tried hard enough or wanted it badly enough, simply become the other kind of person. Simply learn to enjoy the easy gregariousness. Simply relax the internal commentary and let yourself flow without friction through the social world the way most people do. And I want to be honest with you about this premise. It is probably false. Not because you were broken, not because something went wrong in your formation, but because this is not a preference in the sense of something that could go another way. This is closer to a constitutional fact about how your mind works. You receive more than others receive. You process more than others process. You find it harder to turn the inner conversation off because the inner conversation is genuinely valuable, and part of you knows that, even when another part of you is desperate for the relief of just being able to stop thinking for a while and enjoy the party. What changes when you understand this is not the situation. You do not suddenly become more socially comfortable. The gatherings do not become less draining. The shallow connections do not become less unsatisfying. What changes is the story you tell yourself about all of it. Instead of the story in which you are a person with a deficiency, a person who lacks the easy social grace that everyone else has, a person who is somehow failing at being human in a way that needs to be corrected, you have access to a different story. The story in which you are a person with a particular kind of mind, a mind oriented toward depth rather than breadth, toward interior richness rather than exterior smoothness, toward the vita contemplativa rather than the vita activa, in the sense that Arendt meant, not as an escape from life, but as a different, equally legitimate mode of being alive. And this reframing is not a consolation prize. It is not what you tell yourself to feel better about something that is actually a limitation. It is a more accurate description of what is happening. The limitation is real, yes, the cost of this kind of consciousness is real, but so is the gift of it. The ability to sit with difficult questions without needing to resolve them prematurely. The capacity for genuine attention to the actual texture of your own experience. The refusal to accept a performed life as a substitute for a real one. The insistence, even when it isolates you, on encountering things as they actually are rather than as the social agreement requires you to pretend they are. These are not small things. These are, in fact, the things that the best human thinking has always depended on. Let me describe a particular moment that many of you will recognize. You are at an event, some gathering of people who are all doing perfectly fine by every conventional measure. The conversation is pleasant. Nobody is suffering. There is laughter. And yet you are sitting there feeling a loneliness that is somehow more acute than any loneliness you feel when you are actually alone. Because when you are alone, you are with your own thinking, which is sustaining. But here, surrounded by people, you are neither with others nor with yourself. You are in a kind of in-between space where genuine connection is not happening and genuine solitude is not available. And the gap between the surface of the scene and the reality you are privately experiencing feels enormous. And you cannot bridge it, and you are not sure you want to, and you are also not sure what it means that you do not want to. Arendt had a phrase for a certain quality of experience that I find useful here. She talked about the space of appearance, the public realm where we show ourselves and are seen. And she understood that appearing in this space, being visible and present and participating in the collective life of a community, is genuinely important to what it means to be human. We are not complete as purely private beings. The interior richness only becomes fully real when it encounters the world, when the thinking becomes speaking, and the speaking encounters another person who responds. This is true, I am not arguing against it. But she also understood that the space of appearance has conditions, that it requires a certain kind of preparation and a certain kind of self that can only be developed in private, in silence, in the solitude where genuine thinking happens. The person who is always in the space of appearance, always performing and being seen and responding and participating, never steps back to develop the self that does the appearing. And the result is a kind of presence that is there but hollow, visible but without substance. The people who distance themselves from almost everyone are often at some level protecting the substance, refusing to let it be diluted by constant performance, preserving the interior life that makes genuine encounter possible when they do choose to engage. And yes, sometimes they take this too far. Sometimes the withdrawal becomes a permanent condition rather than a periodic practice. Sometimes the protection of the inner life tips into a refusal of the outer life that has its own costs. Sometimes the solitude that was originally fertile becomes merely defended, and the person who once withdrew to think better stops thinking and simply withdraws. This is a real risk. It deserves honest examination. The question of whether your distance is serving your development or merely protecting you from the discomfort of genuine encounter is worth sitting with. not guiltily, not as another occasion for self-criticism, but with genuine curiosity, as a question that has a real answer that you are capable of finding. Because here is what is true about people who keep this kind of distance. They often have a very high standard for what genuine connection looks like, a standard that most casual social interaction cannot meet. They have usually had at least one experience, perhaps several, of genuine encounter, of conversation that went somewhere real, of the rare feeling of being with another person and not having to translate, not having to manage the gap, not having to perform the smaller version of yourself that is socially legible. And having had that experience, however briefly or rarely, they cannot make peace with its absence by filling the space with something lesser. They would rather be alone than pretend. And this is, when you examine it carefully, a form of integrity. Not a comfortable form, not a form that earns you many points in the conventional social economy, but a form of integrity nonetheless. What I want you to consider is the possibility that the distance you keep is not something to be overcome but something to be understood. Not the distance as a permanent destination, not isolation as an ideology, but the particular quality of your selectiveness, the specific nature of what you are protecting when you pull back, the exact texture of what you are looking for when you do choose to be close to someone. Because that understanding, that clarity about what you are actually doing and why, is the thing that can transform the experience of distance from a lonely condition into a meaningful practice. From something that happens to you into something you are doing with intention and awareness. Arendt was deeply committed to the idea of natality, the capacity for new beginnings, the human ability to initiate something that was not there before. She saw this as the most fundamental fact about human existence, that we arrive in the world as interruptions of its existing flow, that each of us represents the possibility of something genuinely new. And one of the things I find most compelling about this idea, in the context of what we are exploring today, is that it applies to the inner life as much as to the outer one. The capacity for genuine thinking, the kind that actually changes something in you rather than just rehearsing what you already believe, is itself a form of natality. It is a new beginning happening inside you. And it requires the conditions you insist on. The quiet, the solitude, the withdrawal from the noise of collective performance. The distance you keep is not nothing. It is the space in which you are capable of beginning. If what I am exploring here is landing for you, if you have been looking for a way to understand your own need for distance that does not require you to frame it as a problem, I want to invite you to be part of this community. There are a great many of us who are asking these questions, who are trying to understand our own minds, rather than simply manage their inconvenient tendencies, who want the kind of thinking that takes the human condition seriously, rather than offering easy reassurances. I create these explorations for people like you, for people who are ready to look carefully at their own experience and ask what it actually means. If you are not yet subscribed, please consider subscribing now. Not because you need more content in your life, but because this particular kind of thinking is rare, and it helps to know where to find it. And wherever you are in your own journey with this, whatever your relationship to solitude and distance and the difficulty of ordinary social life, I want you to know that the thinking you do alone, the inner life you protect so fiercely, matters. It has always mattered. And there are others out here who understand why. There is a quality that the people who keep distance tend to share, and it is not coldness, though it is sometimes mistaken for that. It is a kind of seriousness about what is real, a difficulty with pretending, an inability to sustain, for very long, the comfortable social fictions that make collective life run smoothly. They are not necessarily somber people. Many of them have a very precise, very dry, very genuine sense of humor that comes precisely from their ability to see the absurdity of the gap between the performed version of things and the actual version. But they find it difficult to be continuously warm in the way that social life seems to require. The continuous broadcasting of positivity and interest and enthusiasm and engagement that functions as the social glue most people learn to produce automatically. Because for them it is not automatic, it requires decision. And they have a limited amount of it to spend. This spending model of social energy is actually well documented in research on introversion and sensory processing, but I am less interested in the clinical framework than in the philosophical one. because the clinical framework tends to describe this as a variation in capacity, a difference in how much stimulation people can tolerate before becoming overwhelmed. And while that description is accurate as far as it goes, it does not quite capture the evaluative dimension. It does not capture the fact that for many of these people, the withdrawal is not just about managing overwhelm. It is also about preserving something they consider genuinely more valuable than the thing they are withdrawing from. They are not just protecting their nervous systems, they are protecting their minds, their relationship to their own thinking, their access to whatever it is that happens in them, when they are quiet and alone and not performing and not managing and not translating, when they are simply present to their own interior experience without any audience, actual or imagined. Consider what happens to a person who has spent a long time maintaining a high level of social performance. They come home, and there is a specific quality to the exhaustion. It is not the good tiredness of physical exertion, or even the satisfying tiredness of focused intellectual work. It is more like a depletion, a sense that something was spent that was not replenished, that the exchanges, however pleasant in the moment, did not ultimately give back what they took. And underneath that depletion, if you look carefully, there is often a layer of something harder to name. A low-level frustration, maybe, or a kind of grief, at the distance between the conversation that happened and the conversation that could have happened if the norms of the situation had allowed for it. The things that were not said because they would have been too real, too strange, too much, to anything other than the smooth and pleasant thing the situation called for. The thoughts that had to be set aside because there was nowhere to put them in the social space available. The real questions that stayed inside because asking them would have changed the temperature of the room in ways nobody wanted. For these people, solitude is not the absence of connection. It is the presence of a different kind of connection. The conversation with the books on the shelf, the argument with an idea that needs to be worked through before it becomes clear, the attention to the actual quality of the present moment rather than the performance of being present while actually managing the performance of being present. It is a fullness, not an emptiness. And the people who do not understand why you choose it are often people who have never quite experienced it, or who experienced it briefly and found it uncomfortable, and who interpret your preference for it as either a criticism of their preference for company or a sign that something has gone wrong in you. Something has not gone wrong in you. Let me be as clear about this as I know how to be. The distancing, the selectiveness, the preference for a smaller life with more genuine content over a larger life with more performed connection is not a symptom. It is not a defense mechanism in the clinical sense, not primarily, not in most cases. It is a response to a world that has very little patience for the kind of attention and slowness and genuine presence that you require. A world that moves too fast and expects too much surface agreement and offers very few spaces where the real conversation can happen. And your refusal to pretend that the available spaces are sufficient, your insistence on holding out for something more genuinely nourishing, even when the wait is long and the loneliness is real, is not a failure. It is a kind of fidelity to your own nature that deserves, at minimum, to be understood clearly. Arendt wrote late in her life about the life of the mind as being in some sense a withdrawal from the world of appearances, from the world as it presents itself to the senses and to social perception, in order to make room for the world as it actually is, the world examined rather than the world merely experienced. And she was careful to distinguish this withdrawal from escapism. She was not describing people who could not handle reality. She was describing people who insisted on handling it more rigorously than ordinary social life allows, who found the social consensus about what things mean too hasty, too convenient, too unwilling to sit with genuine difficulty and uncertainty, and who consequently spent large portions of their inner lives in a different place than the people around them, a more questioning place, a less settled place, a place where the ground was always a little uncertain underfoot, but where the view was considerably more honest. If this is you, if this description is landing somewhere in you that has been waiting for this particular kind of recognition, then I want to offer you one more thought before we close, and it concerns the relationship between your distance and your depth. There is a way of understanding your selectiveness that is generous and accurate at the same time. The people you do choose to be close to, the conversations you do choose to have, the moments when you do step out of the solitude and offer your actual presence to another person, carry a quality that is directly related to how carefully you guard the rest of your time and attention. The depth is not in spite of the distance. The depth is because of the distance. The quality of your genuine engagement is made possible by the quantity of your withdrawal, and the people who have experienced your real presence, who have been on the receiving end of your actual attention rather than the managed version, know this. They feel the difference. They feel that they are getting something from you that you do not give easily, and that its value is connected to its rarity. This is not a justification for permanent isolation. It is not a permission slip to withdraw from all human contact and call it philosophy. Arendt would be the first to insist that the interior life has to eventually rejoin the world, that the thinking has to become speaking, that the vita contemplativa feeds back into the vita activa rather than replacing it. But it is a reframing of the withdrawal as preparation rather than failure, as the condition of possibility for something rather than the avoidance of something, as a form of respect for the seriousness of genuine connection, taken so seriously that you will not substitute the imitation for the real thing, even when the imitation is widely available and the real thing is rare. You are not wrong about what you need. You have never been wrong about that. What you have sometimes been wrong about is the story you told yourself about needing it. The story in which needing it made you deficient, in which your distance was evidence of something broken rather than evidence of something exacting. The distance is real. The loneliness it sometimes produces is real, but so is the interior life it makes possible. And so is the particular quality of presence that people like you bring when you do choose to be present. A presence that is possible only because you take it seriously enough to protect the conditions that make it real. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, quite a lot. You arrived here today perhaps looking for someone to tell you that your distance is okay. And I hope you are leaving with something more interesting than that. Not just that it is okay, but that it is something. That it has a logic, that it has a purpose you may not have fully seen. That the solitude you guard so carefully is not a wall around a lack, but a space around something living, something that thinks and questions and refuses easy comfort and insists, even when the insisting is painful, on the dignity of genuine encounter over the convenience of performed connection. That is the interior life of the person who distances themselves from almost everyone. And it deserves at last to be understood on its own terms.